Hello, I'm Rabbitearsblog, and welcome to my random comic review series, or my random review series, whichever topic I discuss today. Today's comic I'm going to review is Joss Whedon's classic comic, Fray. Now, I have always been a huge fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Alright, I didn't exactly become a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer until way later on in my years, since I was more of a fan of Hercules the Legendary series when I was little. But when I heard that Joss Whedon was making a comic somewhat similar to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I was ecstatic, and I immediately went ahead and picked this comic up. So before I get into my thoughts on this comic, I would like to give out a brief summary on this comic. It's 100 years into the future, and Manhattan has become a dystopian city filled with crime. Living in this dreary, futuristic world is a young girl named Malika Fray, who works as a thief for hire, stealing precious artifacts for her boss Gunther. One day, a demon named Urkon suddenly comes out of the blue and starts telling Malika that she comes from a long line of vampire slayers, and that it is her destiny to slay vampires. Of course, in this future, the vampires are known as lurks, and no one in this world knows about the vampires, which leaves Malika a bit skeptical about this destiny. However, Malika would soon realize that the vampires are an actual threat as they started attacking the city. Can Malika save the day? Read this comic to find out. Alright, so here are some things that I loved about this comic. For one thing, I do love the fact that this comic is strongly related to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, especially with the scene where Malika finds out that she comes from a long line of vampire slayers, even though they never mention whether or not the vampire slayer before Malika is Buffy or not, which really helps set up a mysterious mood for the story. I also love the world that Malika Fray lives in, as it is a dystopian world where crime rules the city, kind of like the world that Batman lives in, the city of Gotham. It was also interesting seeing all the futuristic technology that inhabits this world, like the flying cars and the guns that shoot lasers instead of bullets, and seeing how the characters use these contraptions to their advantage was truly fantastic to see. Malika Fray, the heroine in this comic, was probably one of the greatest heroines I have ever seen in comics, as she seems to be shown as the grittier and tougher version of Buffy Summers. In Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Buffy is also a tough heroine, but she is often shown as a sweet-natured person trying to balance her life as a vampire slayer and a normal person. Malika Fray, on the other hand, is often shown as having an attitude, and is always ready to put up a fight, since, considering the world that she lives in, which is a dystopian future, that's to be expected. I enjoy reading the backstory of Malika Fray, as it was sad knowing about why she has such an estranged relationship with her older sister Erin, who is a cop. Malika's sister Erin blames Malika for the death of their brother Hearth, when Malika and Hearth went out to steal some goods and Hearth ends up being bitten by a vampire. I think a good story in general focuses enough time on developing the character's background, so that way the audience would understand where the characters is coming from and why the characters do the things they are currently doing. Joss Whedon is definitely a master at making all his characters relatable to the audience, and therefore I found myself really enjoying all the characters in this comic, especially Malika Fray. In this case, if Joss Whedon hadn't spent so much time in developing Malika's background story about her estranged relationship with her sister Erin, then Malika probably would have been portrayed as a typical tough and emotionless street thief. Therefore, we wouldn't have felt anything from Malika's situation and why she is always being seen as sort of a loner in this comic. Carl Malene and Andy Owens' artwork was fantastic, especially of the image of Malika Fray herself. She looks like a punk rock girl with blue hair and pink tips in the end of her hair, which really brings out her unique and tough personality. I also love the artwork of the futuristic world of Manhattan, as it looks dreary with so many gray and blue colorings that reinforce the dystopian feel of this world. The artwork of the lurks in this world were frightening yet awesome at the same time, as the lurks look like pale humans with yellow eyes and sharp fangs that basically tells the readers that they are really vampires. Now, probably the only thing that sort of bothered me about this comic is that this wasn't created into an ongoing series. Even though Malika Fray is in Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 8 comics, I haven't really read the Buffy the Vampire Slayer comics as of now. I only found this out on Comic Vine. I felt that her character was very well layered enough to sustain her own miniseries. Malika Fray seems to have this deep background about her guilt that dealt with her brother's death, and the fact that she has to fight so many vampires in the world would definitely carry on her own series. But I guess the reason why Fray didn't exactly get her own series is because the premise of this comic is a bit too similar to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Both characters have to fight vampires to save their worlds. Fray was actually created when Buffy the Vampire Slayer ended his run, so it's kind of hard to tell if Fray was meant to fill in the void of the female protagonist fighting vampires plotline that made Buffy the Vampire Slayer so popular. However, Fray was created before the Buffy the Vampire Slayer comics came out, and because both comics had the same premise of female protagonists fighting vampires, it would have seemed a bit strange to see two comics with the same idea come out at the same time. The rating for Fray wasn't really given, at least not on the graphic novel volume I bought. But I'm guessing the rating is T+, for older teens. There is some bloody violence in this graphic novel. Well, this comic does deal with some serious vampire slaying and brief language, but it's not as violent as most comics that deal with vampires. Overall, I give Fray a 5 out of 5. Lots of brilliant character development on all the characters, and the story itself was brilliantly written by Joss Whedon that I found myself being so invested in the characters and their backstories that truly made them stand out from any story that deals with vampire slaying. Also, the scenes with the vampire slaying were very well done, so I would highly recommend this book to anyone who's a fan of Joss Whedon's work. Well, that's my review on Joss Whedon's classic graphic novel Fray, and be sure to check out more reviews from my random review series. See you later!